proximity. However, he said some impetus may have been provided by the proximity of an election. Butterfly. There are less pictures of smiling children and butterflies. Ton. They adored Saving Private Ryan, for example. People loved it and it made a ton of money. Drought. In eastern and southern Ethiopia, a prolonged drought has killed crops and drained wells. Saloon. It is launching a revamped version of its 3-series Saloon class next month. Shabby. After the success of Garfield, the movie, Britain's Shabby Tabby. Payoff. $1 million payoff for former Shell boss. Recognize. Bloom recognizes the darker aspects of Anderson's authorship, Prince Frederick said. Accordingly, the processor then monitors the surface you are running on, and adjusts the tension accordingly. Communism. Now the Blair government proposes the law system of fascism and communism. Tack. But the clampdown has caused fraudsters to change tack, Retail Decisions said. Uplift. The company said these actions should significantly uplift earnings. Flip. Foster's has done a backflip, said Sean Burns, a fund manager at Deutsche Asset Management. Saliva. Its main drug, desmoteplase, is based on a protein in the bat's saliva. First and foremost, this is a human tragedy. Fluent. Mr. Fisher, who speaks fluent Hebrew, will have to become an Israeli citizen to take the job. Prestige. But the Lisbon targets are about much more than just economic prestige. Inconclusive. BBC Home Affairs correspondent Danny Shaw said the research is inconclusive. Tame. Inflation has since been tamed and economic prospects are improving. Apparel. They included the textiles, apparel, tobacco, chemicals and transportation sectors. Quarry. The Markfield, Leicestershire-based company runs 142 quarries in the UK and the US. Collectively, other surveys collectively show a rapid slowdown in UK house price growth. She pointed out. Align. A lot of stars have aligned in the last 18 months to make it a reality. Blister. Blisters were a factor, but mostly my stomach wasn't that great, she said. Powder. O'Sullivan keeps his powder dry. Brim. After 3 successive wins over the past fortnight, McIlroy is brimming with confidence. Vessel. A second Royal Fleet auxiliary vessel, the Bayleaf, is also being sent. Fertility. But fertility expert Lord Winston said he thought it was rather good ministers held ethical views. Enthusiastically. Musicians are embracing the internet enthusiastically, said Ms. Madden. Weep. He was led weeping from the courtroom by U.S. Marshals, AP said. Marshal. He was led weeping from the courtroom by U.S. Marshals, AP said. Immunity. The Russian government has sovereign immunity. Stardom. Stom says Rooney's teenage stardom is in stark contrast to his own start in the game. Correspond. Reggie did not correspond with disco in the 70s. Wicked. I can't sleep thinking about what these wicked people might try to do to him, she said. Toss. It claimed both filmmakers tossed Hollywood convention out the window. Infiltrate. As technology infiltrates our biology, how will our brains function differently? Creepy. In Hide and Seek, De Niro plays a widower whose daughter has a creepy imaginary friend. Flesh. Prime Minister and I wanted a flesh and blood fight, says Mr. Major. Troupe. It is performed by a 40-strong music and theater troupe in their debut film performance. Trait. Women tend to have those traits a lot better than men. Statue. 55 statues were stolen en route to the awards in 2000. 52 were recovered 9 days later. Replicate. This is for the top replicating idea that spread about wedlogs. Sofa. They shouldn't be sitting at home on the sofa vegetating. Temperamental. We were never temperamental, fractious or walked out slamming doors, he said. Shade. Characters were either all good or bad, with no shades of gray. Heyday. In its heyday, Marvel was selling 50 million copies a year. Pavement. His star is the 2277th to be embedded in the pavement on Hollywood Boulevard. Recluse. Feldskog has been a virtual recluse since the band split up in 1982. Homecoming. Masoud Shajara, from the Muslim Safety Forum, said, "What sort of homecoming is this?" Shrewd. Rapper Kanye West's Shrewd Soul. Overdone. The band have capitalized on a craze for artists playing catchy pop music with rock overtones. Skate. Celebrities get their skates on. Skeleton. A skeleton found by the River Severn is not Edwards. Tests reveal. Vested. People like to have a vested interest in what they're watching. Bestow. This is about the industry bestowing awards on what they think are the best films of the year. Negligence. The 22-year-old singer's family came to an undisclosed settlement over a negligence claim in 2003. Fascination. Now, thankfully the fascination has worn off and I have a girlfriend but still no job. Satire. A brass-eye satire of the media handling of pedophilia sparked 2,500 complaints in 2001. Prostitute. He won damages after the newspaper printed allegations about involvement with a prostitute. Saxophone. Parker's Saxophone Heads Auction. Acoustic. The remainder of the band played a short acoustic set on Monday. Crumble. It is a landmark building in Swansea and would otherwise just crumble, he said. Giddy. We have to travel this week and we can't afford to get too giddy about this result. Drastic. This can't be achieved without drastic cuts in local services in their own communities. Disciplined. You have to be very dedicated and you have to be very disciplined. Admirer. He said, "I am a great admirer of British cinema since the 1930s and 40s. Up until now. Perpetuate. This cannot be perpetuated in movies." Disgust. A furious Rusetsky slammed his racket onto the ground in disgust and was warned by the umpire. Notwithstanding, comedian Reeves remains 3/1 favorite to win the show, after Pasquale. Obituary. Dame Alicia Markova. Intimidating. I've got the rough idea but this is the most intimidating project of my career. Courageous. Police praise courageous Aussie. Lament. Amnesty chief laments war failure. Unplug. This is not Nirvana unplugged. Unprovoked. The band said they were victims of an unprovoked attack in a nightclub. Collaborative. If I am right about what innovation is, you need to be multidisciplinary and collaborative. Distorted. Lawyers also fear the effect because jurors have a distorted view of how forensic evidence is used. Holistic. It's a holistic place used for education, weddings, deaths and births. Squarely. The films are squarely pitched at younger audiences. Transformer. Love to see Transformers with real actors and CGI. Wizard. She heads to a moving castle kept by Howl, a wizard, and searches for a way to become normal again. Understudy. The role will be played by understudy Joey Collins until Slater joins the show. Gorgeous. The Aviator is a gorgeous movie, but it's colder. Skateboard. It was thought to be like skateboarding, he said, a craze that everyone thought would go away. Spectacle. The game promises to be a great spectacle, he said. Demolish. We have not threatened to demolish the house. Grit. And Roddick's grit pays off as he manages to hold. Forbidden. It's about forbidden love. Cage. Cage films third week at US top. Invoke. Local councillors would have to show certain conditions had been met before invoking the power. Boycott. Church urges Nelly show boycott. Grief. Former prime ministers too have come to grief at the hands of a persistent member of the public. Convulse. The killing and Fortuyn's death in 2002 convulsed the Netherlands. Tolerant. Such a secular state would be markedly less tolerant, RT Rev Scott Joint argued. Overthrow. The books tell of a battle against the church and a fight to overthrow God. Modification. But there may be some modification of terms. Locked. In a locked room at the heart of Parliament there is a hive of scandal. Proclaim. Last Saturday, one newspaper proclaimed that England were still the #1 side in the world. Realize? I think not. I didn't realize Radio 2 had so many listeners under the age of 10. Congregation. On Friday, the Cardinal will ask the congregation to search for peace. Expel. Mr. Galloway was expelled from the Labour Party because of his staunch opposition to the war on Iraq. Utmost. There are a lot of fantastic runners in the race, but I shall be doing my utmost to upset them. Desolate. Mr. Brown seems haunted by her eyes. Desolate of all hope. Haircut. His advice for one young contestant was to get a haircut and a brain transplant. Crook. He could join the rest of the crooks in the Houses of Parliament. Toughen. A Home Office spokesman said the system had been toughened and tightened since the investigation. Vigorous. I shall be leading a vigorous campaign for the causes I believe in. Postgraduate. In fact, surprisingly more go into postgraduate study than those from more affluent backgrounds. Horrify. If fuel duty does rise, we will be absolutely horrified. Overture. Liverpool legend Phil Thompson has pleaded with Steve Gerrard to reject any overtures from Chelsea. Unjust. But the Tory leader will argue against positive discrimination, saying it is outdated and unjust. Bewilderment. In a state of bewilderment after an autumn series that began with a superb victory over Australia. Tomb. Mr. Blair briefly visited the tomb of Yasser Arafat in Ramallah, the first world leader to do so. Turmoil. And the ex-Wallaby added, if England lost that, they'd be in bloody turmoil. Intolerant. Mr. Bell said Muslim, Jewish and evangelical Christian schools must be intolerant of intolerance. Intolerance. Mr. Bell said Muslim, Jewish and evangelical Christian schools must be intolerant of intolerance. Inference. He replies, what is the inference of that? Conceivable. But you cannot have cameras at every conceivable angle to pick up such anomalies. Hepatitis. Under 16s would not face tests for hepatitis and HIV. Backyard. But Corey is relishing the prospect of taking on the Irish in their own backyard. Extremism. This combined are breeding grounds of extremism and terrorism. Bark. If all the dogs are doing is barking at the deer, then nobody can define that as hunting. Exploitation. For too long wages were a point of exploitation. What could an employer get away with? Hardship. This latest increase of 20p an hour will cause even more financial hardship. Straw. Straw backs ending China embargo. Holocaust. The Queen will also host a reception for Holocaust survivors at St. James's Palace. Overcrowded. We are already more overcrowded than India, and we are 4 times more overcrowded than France. Gracious. We have always been good at being gracious in defeat. Bigot. Jameson issues warning to bigots. Downright. And to call that a cut is at best a misrepresentation, at worst a downright lie. Illicit. Most people researching their family history want to discover some tale of illicit love. Coordinate. The US was very bad at coordinating with anyone, and India had its own problems. Ms. Short said. Conserve. In my semi-final race, I should have won the race, but I was conserving energy. Palace. Palace threat over Cantona masks. Incapacitate. A 2.5-inch needle went in yesterday and I'm fairly incapacitated today as a result. Pronouncement. But it is not just public pronouncements from ex-aides. Founding. He says he was not German bashing but saying peace was the EU's founding aim. Drip. Moody had to be put on a drip in an attempt to force antibiotics through his infected finger. Genetic. E.t., for example, is genetic and can afflict people throughout their lives. Cringe. That's the one thing that makes me cringe. Destructive. It was a very intense occasion and a very destructive game. He recalled. Meddle. They are fearful of meddling with what they see as the stuff of souls. Temple. Kennedy to make temple address. Scruffy. The mortal threat back then was a scruffy little Austrian called Adolf Hitler. Precaution. We took silly precautions. Tyrant. That was why the tyrants lost. Fanatic. It has sleeper fanatics inside our society. So did the IRA. Erroneous. The idea that the new terrorism demands new powers is erroneous. Illogical. We refute both charges as unsubstantiated and illogical, he said. Tempo. And Benitez said, we started at a very high tempo and had many chances. Awkward. They have organized a game at a rather awkward time, he added. Rehearse. We rehearse it time and time again. CAF. The World Cup winner missed Wasps' 12-9 loss to Bath on Saturday after injuring his right calf. Affirm. We have reaffirmed recently to Stephen that we are trying to build a team around him. Selfish. But then you start to really be a little bit more selfish and try to find a way out of there. Antibiotic. He has had a big course of antibiotics but they haven't done the job we hoped they would. Somebody had a new thing that would you. Jog. At 3 kilometers per hour. It is closer to a leisurely jog. Predator. I just wonder if they lack a predator, particularly with Didier Drogba injured. Exaggerated. Suspension would have been a bit exaggerated, Flores told Sports Daily Marca. Bored. Some kids who start early get bored. Spearhead. The DS spearheads Nintendo's attempt to continue its dominance of the handheld gaming market. Vacate. Boca re-signed Martin Palermo, forcing Tevez to vacate his favored center forward role. Horrendous. He said. It's an horrendous situation. Cricket. He's become to South African rugby what Jonty Rhodes was to South African cricket. Insignificant. Perhaps most compelling, yet some might say insignificant, is instantaneous channel flicking. Flattering. It's very flattering to be linked to top clubs in England. I'm glad that no one is forgetting me. Deceptive. His serve is a little deceptive. Dangle. Now they have the carrot of the plum draw in the last 8 dangling before them. Salvage. We are taking this action in order to salvage our pride, said Kiplagat. Stitch. He did not require stitches. Resolute. I am resolute that it will not take over my life. Substantiate. The charge cannot be substantiated, he said. Accomplishment. She wants to start rebuilding her confidence through performance accomplishment. Rehabilitate. Open Chief Paul McNamee had said, Kim's wrist obviously isn't going to be rehabilitated. Adversity. How you respond to adversity is what marks you out as elite or not, argues Richards. Swoop. There have been suggestions that Wenger will swoop for a high-quality shot stopper in the new year. B's handed potential Man UTD tie. Convincingly. Nadal also holds convincingly as both players feel their way into the 4th set. Sock. We had to work our socks off and try and build our scores gradually. Dependable. The dependable Yandelaide keeps the number 10 jersey, despite clamors for the flair of Michalak. Ruthless. The All Blacks would have been ruthless and buried us in the first half. Titanium. Nanoscale titanium dioxide. CO2. Coatings give fabrics antibacterial and anti-odor properties. Leisurely. At 3 kilometers per hour, it is closer to a leisurely jog. Miniature. There are a number of companies who already produce miniature PCs based on mini ITX motherboards. Overblown. Call of Duty comes with a suitably bombastic score and overblown presentation. Stylish. Compact and stylish. The Mac Mini would not look out of place in any home. Validation. It's a technical validation that it can work, he said. Skirt. I am just assuming it was the one of me posing on seats where my skirt rode up, she said. Caption. The service. Google Video Beta. Searches closed caption information that comes with programs. Heretic. One recruit calls himself heretic. Ecology. The reserve conducts vital research on both panda breeding and bamboo ecology. Restoration. The restoration of the older Star Wars episodes revealed some interesting items too. Additive. Now you can't buy petrol with lead additives, and we're all better off as a result. Tail. Once Google started blocking these search queries, the rate of infection tailed off sharply. Wildlife. The game sea snake having to survive on his wits in the jungle, including eating wildlife. Validity. In the past, sports fans would be left debating the validity of the try for days and weeks to come. Bureau. The Bureau is investigating the phony emails. Theoretical. Its peak theoretical performance is expected to be 360 teraflops, and will fit into 64 full racks. Moderation. When big files were being shared, moderation systems were key, said Mr. Powell's. Alias. The Skulls program is thought to have been written by a malicious hacker using the alias T222. Restitution. The lawsuit is asking for restitution, damages and other compensation. Pipe. It's not about the pipe, if you will, or the silicon per se, it's about the application, he said. Fried. And at a mere 20 British pounds, Metal Slug 3 is as cheap as sliced, fried spuds, as the man says. Fever. Sebit fever takes over Hanover. Parrot. He tried a prototype version of the software to explore a photograph of a parrot. Amendment. This undermines a fundamental First Amendment right that protects all reporters. Seneca. Topping the list was a controversial dam on the Seneca Upper Yangtze River. Artery. Stents are tubes that are used to keep an artery open after it has been unblocked. Diplomacy. Still, by the standards of diplomacy, the European ministers were forthright. Plantation. Because of defaults by plantation owners, citizens and Canal ended up owning about 1,250 slaves. Impoverish. But he has rejected any tariff increases, alleging this will impoverish citizens further. Lawn. It makes lawn and garden products in Newton Aycliffe, and cookers and ovens in Spennymoor. Oven. It makes lawn and garden products in Newton Aycliffe, and cookers and ovens in Spennymoor. Lounge. This is a company in the departure lounge of life. Desertion. However, one beneficiary of the desertion of the high street is expected to be online stores. Rationale. The rationale is similar to the one underpinning SBC's AT&T deal. Hydroelectric. As a hydroelectric power generator, it has not been hurt by higher coal costs. Eternal. Russia is Ukraine's eternal strategic partner, Mr. Yushchenko said. Thermal. Its core products are copper, coking coal, thermal coal, ferrochrome, vanadium and zinc. Pardon. Georgia plans hidden asset pardon. Dismayed. It said it was dismayed at the situation and wants Congress to overturn the legislation. Cowardly. But age concern said imposing a retirement age of 65 was cowardly and a complete U-turn. Contradiction. Mr. Lebedev said there were absurd contradictions in the case. Scold. He scolded me for pouring too much soy sauce or told me fruit was not for children. Sauce. He scolded me for pouring too much soy sauce or told me fruit was not for children. Fertilizer. Good rains, increased use of fertilizers and improved seeds contributed to the rise in production. Buffet. Weak data buffets French economy. Delta. Delta cuts fares in survival plan. Mutate. Fraud doesn't just disappear, it mutates to the next weakest link in the chain, he said. Mismanagement. This is the bill for their mismanagement over the past years, said HVB analyst Peter Thilo Halser. Manger. Foster's has done a backflip, said Sean Burns, a fund manager at Deutsche Asset Management. Synonym. Lisbon risks becoming a synonym for missed objectives and failed promises, his report said. Politeness. We don't have the luxury anymore just to exchange politeness with one another. Ferry. From there, passengers would be ferried to their final destinations by smaller planes. Labor. The belief comes despite the latest Labor Department report showing a surprise rise in unemployment. Frost. Davos itself is in deep frost. Bean. The country saw more than $1.2 billion worth of the beans exported during 2003-04. Asphalt. It also has 164 ready-mixed concrete plants, 90 asphalt plants and 32 precast concrete factories. Placebo. But IRESA proved no better than a placebo in extending lives in the trial involving 1,692 patients. Screw. They screwed up the financing, said Ronald Smith, an analyst at Renaissance Capital in Moscow. Mismatch. Why the mismatch between the public perception and the market's response? Conformity. We are keen to welcome international collaborations that are in conformity with our national goals. Extortion. Mr. El-Jindi was convicted of racketeering, securities fraud and extortion. Coarse. They were brilliant, but very coarse, McGuinness recently said. Doomed. In 1984 he started his film career playing a doomed teenager in horror film Nightmare on Elm Street. Intuition. For me, it is intuition. I have to fall in love with an actor. Visceral. It is a visceral response. Cart. She runs. She gets off coal carts. She jumps off horses. She does everything, Nair said. Boo. She also shared the award for Best R&B Vocal Performance by a Duo or Group with Usher for My Boo. Fussy. We were fussy though, he added. Syllable. Words of more than 2 syllables were discouraged. Medieval. The tale mixes art history with mythology, semiotics with medieval history. Conspicuously. Given the conspicuously low audience figures, that support may be more symbolic than significant. Awfully. It's grown awfully fast in 3 years, maybe too fast, he concedes. Recede. Kate said the covers would be removed if the threat of wet weather receded. Ballroom. The red carpet boasted waltzing dancers in honor of the film's ballroom dancing theme. Swollen. I've heard she has swollen glands. Gland. I've heard she has swollen glands. Rusty. I was a rusty wartime pilot who hadn't flown for 9 years, Haley later recalled. Greed. There is no loyalty in this business, just greed. Gown. Other items will include an evening gown belonging to Ella Fitzgerald. Slang. It's not a slang word or dirty word, it's a biological, anatomical word. Preacher. He said that the dub leader and preacher was a very dynamic, extraordinary figure. Sermon. Neeson used to listen to his sermons on a Friday night in Ballymena. Jewel. To call it a jewel is not an overestimation. Elegant. Hank said that the new film has an elegant message. Embody. I believe in the spirit of Christmas and I think that's embodied in Santa Claus, he said. Clutter. Look at it all. There's so much clutter. Pierce. He said the ear-piercing welcome was unlike anything I've ever encountered. Horrified. She said she was horrified by the deaths of Charlene Ellis, 18, and Letitia Shakespeare, 17. Christianity. The evidence for Jesus and the origins of Christianity is astonishingly good, he said. Impulse. I acted on impulse, Osborne said. Biographer. It's Nirvana unedited, said Cobain biographer Charles Cross. Cube. Rifkin likened the challenge to a musical Rubik's Cube. Hum. We want people to go away from the gigs humming the tunes that we were singing. Contagious. Bloom said. The urge to ban is contagious. Furry. Furry recyclers. Sacred. Is nothing sacred? Sarcastic. They were moody, sarcastic, and rather human. Mysterious. Sean Connery could play the mysterious costume shop owner. Reinvigorate. GoldenEye was a wonderful movie and helped reinvigorate the Bond franchise. Dysfunction. In the case of my show, It's my job to report on the dysfunctions that take place in society. Canal. 2 years later, 24 million saw him apparently shot by a man with a bunch of daffodils by a canal. Corny. It sounds corny. Gardening. He was most recently seen presenting a gardening program for Channel TV. Egalitarian. When you look at the films here, what we are presenting is very much egalitarian. Glare. The person that's been cut off, who's 10 feet from me, is glaring at me like it's death time. Manifest. You realized from the start there was a manifest destiny within him that he believed in. Hey. We have hay. For one thing. Cemetery. The only flowers I ever saw were on a gravestone in our local cemetery. Fictitious. The label believed the school name was fictitious until they received the complaint. Butcher. Coincidentally, it is also the Armenian term for butcher. Picturesque. It takes place in the picturesque southern Indian state of Kerala. Prehistoric. Godzilla first appeared in 1954 as a prehistoric lizard woken by atomic bomb tests. Atomic. Godzilla first appeared in 1954 as a prehistoric lizard woken by atomic bomb tests. Inflammatory. But Mr. Dam said, it's not an inflammatory film. Sibling. The chart-topping Siblings duetted on the Shaka Khan hit Ain't Nobody. Serene. The song makes me calm and serene and happy. Mediocrity. Why do we reward mediocrity so highly in this country? Mediocre. It's a mediocre, sentimental and safe song. Grandma. Even my grandma can download songs now. Evacuation. He added the situation would be monitored carefully in case evacuation became necessary. Missionary. His answer, in part, is because of the missionaries that used to come to his father's church. Heartfelt. I've absolutely no doubt whatsoever this is heartfelt. Marrow. I felt guilt in the marrow of my bones, said the Ealing North MP secular. Such a secular state would be markedly less tolerant. RT Rev Scott Joint argued. Alienate. She is demonizing and alienating our community, he said. Heirloom. She displayed her diamond engagement ring, a royal family heirloom, to reporters. Blonde. He is described as being 5 feet, 9 inches, tall, slim, with blonde hair, blue eyes and a fair complexion. Complexion. He is described as being 5 feet, 9 inches, tall, slim, with blonde hair, blue eyes and a fair complexion. Sighting. Miss Holmes is not missing, but there have been no sightings of Ferguson since Monday. Antithesis. Health Minister Stephen Ladyman said, this document is the antithesis of the nanny state. Consul. Honorary consuls will be appointed in some of the areas affected by the embassy closures. Pandemic. Existing financial commitments on their own will not stop the pandemic. Segregate. Diversity certainly must not mean segregated or separate, he said. Deductible. They were also consulting on making childcare costs tax deductible. Heaven. I was totally covered. It was all through my clothes, and it stank to high heaven. Beard. The suspect is described as white, aged 30 to 40, with a ginger beard. Sweatshop. It's not a jobs at any price economy. Goodbye sweatshops, hello decency. Manpower. Also, small businesses will have to be able to afford this manpower cost. Perish. Altogether, some 6 million people, mainly Jews, perished in the Holocaust. Frightening. He said in a statement, it was a frightening experience. Abduction. Since her abduction, several videos of Mrs. Hassan have been broadcast by Al Jazeera. Hive. In a locked room at the heart of Parliament there is a hive of scandal. Derelict. The building on George Street has been derelict since the 1980s. Clap. If he hadn't have walked off the stage, they would still be clapping, added Mr. Lane. Bishop. There would be 385 MSCPs, including 270 elected members, 87 appointed members and 16 bishops. Polar. That is the goal of the Constitution in a world that is more multipolar than ever. Retort. Mr. Blair retorted voters remembered the record of a government and no comments by politicians. Spouse. The rail tickets are meant to help MPs' spouses get between Westminster and their constituencies. Pheasant. The principle is the same whether it's a tiger or a pheasant. Ideology. Choice as an ideology is beginning to be the privatization of this decade. Vain. Is this indicative of the man contradictory, vain and pompous? Enclose. A comprehensive ban on smoking in all enclosed public places in Scotland. Embryonic. The use of embryonic stem cells in the UK is already allowed. Blockade. Joseph Stalin triggered the Cold War, with the Berlin blockade in 1948. Fascism. Now the Blair government proposes the law system of fascism and communism. Plutonium. A kilo of Semtex will flatten a building. A kilo of plutonium will flatten a city. Riddle. Now we are riddled with red tape and be told what we can or cannot do. Alienation. For very little return and maximum alienation. Posterity. Hobbes has been roundly condemned by posterity, and rightly so. Gravitate. Won't voters looking for an alternative to Labour still naturally gravitate to the Conservatives? Supplant. We have supplanted them as the main alternative to Labour in whole tracts of mainland Britain. Instill. Instilling the importance of work and practice is something you can't buy. Synthetic. I was really on form. My service was good and I really liked playing on the synthetic surface. Cobblestone. Ruddo held on to win despite slipping on some cobblestones and tumbling into a barrier. Threadbare. The Heineken Cup game was there at the weekend and the pitch is a bit threadbare, he said. Gardener. Gardener battles to narrow win. Gifted. It is just a shame we did not take them against such a technically gifted team, said Kerr. Decorum. I'm not a racist and I've never lacked sporting decorum. Scapegoat. They have looked for a scapegoat. Nutrition. 2 task forces have been set up to examine doping and nutrition issues. Magician. But will a safe pair of hands be enough when the adroit hands of a magician might be required? Restless. Brazil's biggest city is a sprawling, ugly, restless metropolis. Passionately. It is the most passionately supported club in Brazil. Ambush. Corinthians fans have invaded the dressing room or ambushed the team coach to attack the players. Kiss. Tevez. Then. Can kiss tranquility goodbye. Condone. I can't condone what he's done. Vertical. O'Sullivan's career is now in vertical takeoff mode. Hull. Hull v Colchester. Gunpowder. When you are gunning for glory and ultimate success, keeping the gunpowder dry is essential. Whitewash. Whitewashed. Salient. But O'Sullivan's side are very capable of proving a salient point this season. Irritable. It is still painful and irritable. Carrot. Now they have the carrot of the plum draw in the last 8 dangling before them. Vomit. The world indoor champion said, I got to the airport and my stomach was upset and I was vomiting. Impersonate. Butraguno, meanwhile, was angry at being impersonated by the radio disc jockey. Ultimatum. Bath faced with Tyndall ultimatum. Priceless. It is a priceless commodity. Scotch. And Perry has moved to Scotch claims that Chelsea could launch a £35 million bid. Ridiculously. Gavin is ridiculously talented. Wobble. Hewitt overcomes wobble in Sydney. Tease. As halftime approached, Henry teased a shot through a ruck of players and inches wide. Majestic. And that's without even mentioning his majestic match-winning penalty. Beforehand. Despite being written off beforehand, several Scots caught my eye against France. Realm. That is not beyond the realms of possibility, he admitted. Gripping. A gripping game between Arsenal and Chelsea ended with the Hauners finishing even at Highbury. Ambulance. Within 3 days he was arriving back in Ireland by air ambulance. Acupuncture. Johnston uses an advanced type of acupuncture and it's very effective. Familiarity. Familiarity with the net also has a certain social cachet. Demon. Tech helps disabled speed demons. Prejudiced. I'm not prejudiced. I'll sell to able-bodied people if I have to. Lever. I bring everything back to me. Steering wheel. Steering column. Gear lever and pedals. Bombastic. Call of Duty comes with a suitably bombastic score and overblown presentation. Repetition. The repetition could be useful although they may all end up talking like robots, said Mr. Renton. Palpable. Mr. Gupta says the power of more Quendy's text message blogs was palpable. Bamboo. The reserve conducts vital research on both panda breeding and bamboo ecology. Composite. Each image was made to slightly overlap so they could be accurately arranged into a composite. Pod. Robotic pods take on car design. Immune. Even the great and good are not immune to losing their beloved gadgets. Hamster. The survey of what else has been left behind included a harp, a dog, a hamster and a baby. Peak. Game makers get Xbox 2 sneak peek. Brood. Our approach is BAR plus loosely, not brute force, he said. Ambient. It's all part of what's known as a pervasive ambient world, where chips are everywhere. Shark. Professional swimming suits reduce drag by incorporating tiny structures similar to shark skin. Rumor. In most elections, numerous rumors have spread about it. Addicted. A minority allow drugs to take over and destroy their lives and become addicted. Evaporation. In fuel cells you need to have pumps and separators and evaporation chambers, he said. Inaugurate. The network has been 3 years in the making and was officially inaugurated in September. Hatch. This hatched a completely new idea. Foolproof. The major part is making it foolproof. Very tough. So that it never breaks, he says. Postulate. And what I'm postulating is that this is the technology that will enable them. Microcosm. We are really going to see these microcosms and commerce will be all over the place. Elated. The creative forces behind radio are elated, says Curry. Unreliable. Landlines were unreliable. Stimulus. He is very childlike. He likes visual stimulus, he told the BBC News website. Foggy. It's particularly suitable as the rain rate is a little low and it's hardly ever foggy, he said. Intermission. And during the intermission, of course, you would still be able to make a phone call. Instantaneous. Perhaps most compelling yet some might say insignificant is instantaneous channel flicking. Prohibitive. For them to do it through cable and so on is price prohibitive, he said. Abstain. Only 2 MEPs backed the draft law at the URI meeting, with 1 voting to abstain. Compass. What about the magnetic compass? Footprint. We can utilize our national footprint. Conditional. It will be able to offer an additional 2 pay TV channels using conditional access technology. Haphazard. Until you reach that point, it is a haphazard business. Freeway. Park your vehicle across the lanes of a freeway, and within seconds there will be a huge pile-up. Pad. CJ can interact with them using a simple system on the control pad. Entirety. But the gameplay experience in its entirety is overwhelmingly positive. Karaoke. It is being recommended for the karaoke market. Synthesizer. He realized that the console could be used as a rudimentary synthesizer. Tidy. Virus writers and hackers will be looking to make a tidy sum. Canvas. It's a bit like being an artist and being given a bigger canvas and a smaller brush. Indistinguishable. PS3 will provide graphics indistinguishable from movies, said Mr. Florin. Critique. Photosig is an online community of photographers who can critique each other's work. Dormant. One is for the viewer's decryption card, while the other has been dormant until now. Ingenuity. It will be down to the ingenuity of the content players, said Mr. Wally.